All right, y'all. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to jump into the state of donor conversations. This is peeling back the layers on what 370 simulated donor conversations across 106 fundraisers has taught us. And I think what we're really excited about is um, this is really the first time that we've been able to have a quantifiable analysis on how our fundraisers actually connecting with donors and what can we learn about it? What does it mean about the state of conversations in the sector? But most importantly, if you walk away with anything today, we want you to have actionable next steps for what you can do starting this afternoon, starting Monday in the conversations that in the relationships that you're building with donors and funders to fuel your mission. My name's Bryan Funk with Practivated. Mallory, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I love seeing everyone. Tell us in the chat where you're calling in from. I'm loving seeing so far. We have the UK represented here, all across the US. I'm here from Berkeley, California. So excited for this conversation. And Bryan, I'm realizing that one of the things we should have said is these 370 fundraiser simulations are across 106 different fundraisers. So I had this moment yesterday where I was like, I hope people don't think that it's 370 of my donor conversations or your donor conversations. This is across 106 fundraisers of all different skill and legacy levels in terms of how long they've been a fundraiser, the roles they sit in. So the insights are super valuable no matter where you sit. So we're so thrilled to get to jump into all of this with you today.
Amazing. And I think before we start, and maybe John Carlo can help us out in the chat a little bit here. We want you to know that, outside of this webinar, all of what we're going to talk about today is available in a downloadable report. So if you haven't had the report, I know many of you do have it. It's how you found your way here today with us, but we want to make sure that you have access to it. So it's free to download. So John Carlo, if you don't mind just dropping a link in the chat, that would be amazing. And I think before we even get started, Mallory, I think we want to do a little bit of level set with you all. And a little bit of housekeeping too. Like, we want this to be a conversation. So, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. John Carlo's helping us in the chat. If you have questions, if you want us to dive deeper, if you need clarification, ask away. We are going to bubble up everything that you want answered here today. So, please, let's stay engaged in the chat. We'll have a couple polls. And I think some of the polls are a bit vulnerable. They are anonymous, but I do kind of want to start this from a place of vulnerability because I think, Mallory and I are both fundraisers. I was a frontline fundraiser in the sector for over 12 years. And the findings in the report was honestly for myself an incredible self-reflection point around, whoa, like jumping back years ago when I was early in my career, reflecting on how I was building relationships and maybe the impacts, positive and negative, that had on the missions I was serving. So I think we want to try to encourage some vulnerability today. And I think we're going to walk the talk and put some skin in the game. So before we start, Mallory, any big vulnerable shares or reflections on what you learned about yourself when it came to digesting the data?
Yeah. And maybe I know we're going to get into this in a moment, but I see a question in the chat. So I just want to sort of start it off. So somebody was asking what simulations mean. So Practivated is the first ever donor conversation platform where fundraisers come to practice donor conversations and prepare for upcoming meetings. We have a scenario library and you can customize donor avatars and go into our basically virtual role play environment. The 370 conversations that we're talking about today are captured across 106 fundraisers inside Practivated. And our tool is used to both sort of analyze fundraiser behavior, but then also the relationship that behavior has on the donor avatar's behavior inside our platform, which is modeled after your real donors. So I just wanted to frame that up. I didn't want there to be any confusion sort of going in. So I'll be honest, when we first started to look at this data, we had no idea what we were going to find. We got to a moment about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, where we had so many incredible users inside the platform, so many practice conversations happening every single day that I was like, we need to look at what's happening here. What can we learn about what sort of results folks are seeing, challenges they're seeing, strengths that we're seeing, growth that we're seeing. I was like, I just want to get into the data. And so we started to analyze really with no idea where that was going to lead us. And what we found were the insights that we're going to be talking about today, the good, the bad, the hard, the like tender parts of it. And I think, one of the insights that we're going to talk in more depth about is the disconnect often, and this brings me to my vulnerable share, between the ability to connect really deeply with donors and actually be able to move that relationship forward in a meaningful, impactful way that drives your mission forward. I thought fundraising would be really easy for me because I love people. I love building relationships. I love building connected relationships. And what I really struggled with as a fundraiser was trying to take this incredibly human, nuanced experience that in some ways felt really natural to me and fit it into this operational system where I had goals and where those people that I had these deep, real relationships with were a part of those goals. And like, I struggled with that line. Like, how do I get to be my real, authentic self in these relationships and hold the intention of this relationship is for the purpose of moving this mission forward? And I think when I looked at the results inside the report and I saw that actually reflected back across these 106 fundraisers, that they were just like me, right? Like really good natural relationship builders. Some things come super easily, but gosh, the level of meetings that aren't ending with a next step or don't have an intentional ask, not just a solicitation, but like, where does this relationship go from here? The like ambiguity, I just realized like it's a little bit hard to like look at, I think, how many meetings, how many relationships I sort of s- sabotaged in some way because I was so afraid of how to bridge that relational component into like intentional movement that would have helped both me and the donor accomplish our goals. So it was a little like hard to swallow sometimes. And I went back to some donor meetings and was like, like that was my problem, you know? But I think like that's why we're here and that's why we wanted to provide this, resource and this information to everybody.
Yeah, and I think maybe like another contextual layer that I can add to this, because I saw there was another question in the chat. Diego, thanks, was asking if the report was AI generated. The analysis was done by our team looking at the data. You can see here these fundraising specific skill sets. So these are actually based upon 16 different data qualifiers. I've listed them here just for you to digest. Feel free to take a screenshot if you want to refer to it later. We're also happy to share these slides. But we actually, across real fundraisers that are doing role play donor conversation simulations in Practivated, are being measured against all 16 of these bullet points. So I think maybe this helps articulate when I say this is the first time we've ever had quantifiable data to look at and say, how confident are fundraisers in their conversations? How, what's the scoring model on the depth of the relationship? What's the ability to navigate tension and pushback? Is it a smooth transition? Is it a rough transition? What's the ask effectiveness from having a relational conversation to a financially driven mission outcomes conversation? So we're actually able to measure these because we have real fundraisers practicing real conversations in the environment within our system. So maybe that I hope that this helps ground the kind of big idea that we're talking about in a more practical way that feels digestible. And yeah, no worries, Patricia. We'll definitely send you the slides. And I think for me, I got my career in fundraising started in both, I mean, I had a donor portfolio, but I also was leading like global multi-million dollar peer-to-peer campaigns. And I think I had two big takeaways. One is that we always had really clear fundraising goals and outcomes for our campaigns. We had really clear pathways for how we were going to get there. But I don't think any of those goals actually translated into any meetings I was having. Like, I, like you, Mallory, was like great at building relationships, great at creating connection, great at selling the mission and the impact and talking about our programs. But like, I wasn't architecting goals out of these conversations. I was kind of going in blind, just pushing towards the end goal, but not understanding how the individual conversations were going to be the building blocks to get me there. So that's like a oof, like I think when I said at the beginning, like, where did I actually sell our mission or our impact short? I think I questioned, like, what could I have done better on behalf of the people and programs and communities we were trying to serve? Um, so that's like a real, like, look in the mirror, gulp moment for me. And I think the other thing I realize, and we're going to get into this in this conversation, but I think that I had more success managing relationships with peer-to-peer fundraisers than I did my actual donors, because it was easier and more comfortable
Mm-hmm.
to action someone when they were self-choosing, I'm going to do this and fundraise on your behalf. And so it was easier to go deeper and to have harder conversations with those supporters versus the actual funders. And so I'm also gut checking, like, where was I too comfortable?
Oh my God, we could have we are going to talk about that more later, but I think there were things that, my discomfort led to me grant writing when I shouldn't have been grant writing, applying to grants that we weren't even a good fit for because it felt more comfortable to like submit that LOI or submit that grant than to have that vulnerable, tender conversation with an individual. So yeah, I think there's so much here around what we can see in terms of fundraiser like fear and resistance and where things kind of go off the rails that give incredible insights to why certain behaviors you might be seeing in your fundraisers or yourself and why certain activities might actually be getting quote unquote like prioritized, but not necessarily from a strategic perspective, but from an avoidance of this other piece perspective. So I think these insights are going to be really, really valuable. The other thing I'll just say about this data set, and then I know we have to move on, is that, we use generative AI to analyze the conversations inside the platform. And truthfully, no human could do that. I mean, we have, as we speak, multiple fundraisers practicing conversations, getting feedback right now inside the platform. Tivi, our coach inside the platform, can listen to a 10-minute or analyze a 10-minute conversation, score a fundraiser on 16 indicators, tell that fundraiser exactly why they got that score, exactly what they could do differently next time, actually then have a voice conversation about every single one of those 16 indicators with the fundraiser, what they should do next time. That is not like a human coach cannot do that. So the only way to get this type of insight and feedback and support is using generative AI. And so the data analysis and the report itself, like we created that, we are human, we do the majority of all that work, but we do use generative AI, both in the tool, and in other ways where our capacity as human coaches or consultants would not actually be able to deliver results like that. And that's really how we think about AI in general. Is how it deepens the human work. So okay, I know we have to move on, but I just wanted to make sure to say that.
Yeah, I feel like there's segments of this conversation that we could pull out and spend an hour
Yeah,
talking on, right?
I'll
So,
stop.
um, but I think I have one last piece of context before we actually dive into the data and dive into the results and start playing with it. And and I think this is important when we think about role playing a donor conversation, whether that's role playing in your office with your manager, with a peer, or role playing in a simulated environment in an AI platform like Practivated. And it's donor behavior has patterns that we might not recognize. And the idea here is that the fundraiser's psychology, your state of mind, your state of being, your framing, and your behavior, your interactions, um, layered with how are you prompting? How are you asking questions and nurturing a relationship to get a behavior from the donor? That is what is leading to your fundraising performance. And so I wanted to create space for us to like recognize like the importance of the layers between where you are, how you're prompting and engaging, and how that actually drives donor behavior as an important lever in understanding the data. And Mallory, maybe you can share a little bit about um, the FOG's behavior model, because you've done a ton of research on what drives donor behavior change. So could you just set some context behind this model? And then I'm going to show you all a quick graph that I think will really help this land home before we dive into the data.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I'll say is that I've been trained by BJ Fogg in habit and behavior design. And I think about this model both as it applies to donor behavior, but also fundraiser behavior. And essentially for the last 5 years have been working at that like intersection. How do we change our behavior as fundraisers in order to drive donor behavior? And so in order for any human to take an action, whatever action, whether that's us sending the email to that donor, whether it's the donor clicking that CTA in our email, that three things need to come together in that moment: enough motivation to take the action, the ability to take the action, and being prompted to take the action. And so in all of ours, we're a little bit better at doing this when we think about things like email or text message or even direct mail. And I think we really miss this in conversation, recognizing that in every donor conversation, we want to be thinking about motivation, ability, and prompts. And if all of those three things are not coming together in a given moment, we are not encouraging the person to take action. And then the last thing I'll say, just based on the chart that Bryan showed before, is that this also relates to us as fundraisers. And you'll see if you are inside Practivated, you've probably seen this all over our system. We understand that in order for the fundraiser to send that email, in order for them to pick up the phone, they need to have enough motivation, ability, and be prompted to do so. And so we've designed our platform really for that around fundraiser behavior. But then in the analysis of these conversations and the way that we think about encouraging their behavior, it's to make sure that in conversations, they are bringing these behavior change elements into the conversation as well.
Amazing. And I think this is this is a great visualization of um, when you juxtapose a donor's motivation to give and the fundraiser's ability and confidence to deliver an effective prompt. This is what's going to increase the likelihood of securing a gift. And this idea and this behavior model, I think, is a really helpful foundation for the leading indicators that are really positive in the data that we see, and informing areas for improvement and kind of the watchouts that we're seeing across fundraisers, across verticals in the sector. Any final comments, Mallory, before we dive in?
No, let's get into it.
Okay, great. So here we are. We are diving into the state of donor conversations. Let's get into it. So we're going to start with where fundraisers are today, and we're going to start with some bright spots. And overall, fundraisers in our data set showed moderate and balanced performance across 4 core skill categories. This is relationship building, communication and delivering, fundraising specific skills, and strategic thinking. And this is all on a scale of 0 to 100. And so the strongest indicator, and this is the one that I want to spend some time on, the strongest indicator was that it's clear that the greatest gifts that fundraisers have, and this will come as no surprise to anyone here in the room, relationship building. We're all fantastic at relationship building. And we also saw that 78% of the 106 fundraisers do a great job at linking the mission to the relevant personal interests of donors and supporters. And this is, Mallory, this is where I want to dance for a little while, because I think that there is a watch out here that I want to get to. But I think before we get there, I'd love to hear from you, like looking at this bright spot, looking at what our superpower is across the sector. We're all here because we love the mission and we believe deeply in bringing people together to solve the problems that we're looking to face in our communities in the world. It's why we're here. And how can teams leverage this superpower more effectively, Mallory?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting. This data, I was actually like pretty thrilled to see this, maybe like surprised, thrilled to see it in terms of like fundraisers' natural ability to find some alignment between their organization and funders in conversations and the consistency there. It also definitely gave me, as you would say, heartburn a little bit, because it also made me feel like, oh my gosh, the missed opportunity then is so big. Like they're doing the legwork. Like they're doing the legwork in these conversations to really connect the dots in a lot of ways. And I actually hear from a lot of managers that come to us and fundraisers that come to us wanting Proactivated's help. They feel like their fundraisers don't actually know how to dig deeper into those deeper insights, into finding that true alignment, because they aren't being able to transition them into a major gift or a transformational gift. They're like, we're struggling to be able to unlock where that deeper alignment lives. I think what the data showed us is actually in a lot of cases, they are unlocking it. They're then just not transitioning that into a conversation about impact and giving and transformation. And that to me, I was like, oh, like we're so close. Like we're so close. So I'm so excited by this number, because I actually think in a lot of ways, one of my favorite things about Proactivated having the 16 indicators is I think it also gets to show fundraisers in each and every conversation what they're doing well and what they're doing right. And, my 6-year-old is always like, be less positive. You're too positive. But I really think that we need to know what we're doing well. And we walk out of meetings all the time and we're like, oh my gosh, I totally, bombed that. And I think to be able to say, no, actually, like these 7 things, you are phenomenal. Here's where it went off the rails, and it took away from those things that you actually really naturally did. So I was very excited about this, and I think it further illuminates the opportunity when we start to, hopefully in a moment, talk about the big challenge areas.
Yeah, and this bright spot is going to correlate directly with a challenge area. And it's this, and again, it goes back to the behavior model that we just shared. It's about making that transition, delivering the right prompt, the right ask effectively in order to transition a great relationship into an impactful relationship. And so I think that's a really, really big key here. Um, I'm just going to jump back
Yeah.
really, really quick, Mallory. Um, is there anything else that you wanted? I know we just honed in on relationship building. Um, is there anything related to communication and delivery and fundraising specific skills that you want to peel back the layers on and highlight here?
I mean, I think, one of the things I want to say, I see a question in the chat around like, what is the background around these conversations? Like, were they existing donors, or number of years that the donors given, length of time? So no, all of those things. So all of those scenarios are included in here. We didn't segment by scenario though, because we wanted to see if there were patterns across all conversations. And I actually think that's what's really interesting about this, is that we saw really clear patterns when you looked across every single type of donor conversation. And I think what that really indicates is like where the fundraiser behavior piece really matters. So obviously there's variance between every single type of conversation. We sometimes will see communication and delivery numbers go up when folks are doing easier practice scenarios inside the platform. And then when they move on to medium and hard, we start to see those numbers change a little bit. But that's why we did such a large sample size of fundraisers and conversations, was to really just show high level. I think, Bryan, I'm just looking at time. I think we should dig into the challenge areas and make sure folks are getting to walk away with some really tangible coaching strategies here.
100%. So when we talk about the bright spot, and I think this is sort of our aha moment, is we're great at building relationships, but the lowest score um, aggregated across all fundraisers was ask effectiveness. Um, and I think where I would love you to dig in, Mallory, is I think that we tend to spend a lot of time in the places where we're very comfortable. I think we talk a lot about where fundraisers get stuck in the friend zone and we're playing within our sphere of comfort. But I actually want us to flip the script when it comes to building a deep, comfortable, connective, synergetic relationship and then transitioning and making a pivot to making an ask around a subject that's often very taboo. It's
Mm.
hard to talk about money, right? It's hard to dig into those conversations. Like that's impacting our ask effectiveness. But I want you to flip the script on fear. Can
Yeah.
can you talk to us about the positive role that fear can play in a donor conversation?
Ooh, that's not where I thought you were going with that. I mean, I think
Surprise.
well, I think there's a few different pieces here, right? Like one thing to say is that ask effectiveness and how we measure it, not all practice scenarios inside Practivated are solicitation conversations. That's actually a super important part of the form. Is that it's not that's why you can't use a sales training product for fundraising because we know that the goals of fundraising meetings are not all about money, right? There's a lot of goal setting around things that move a relationship forward is just as important even if it's not a solicitation conversation. And ask effectiveness is related to the goal of the conversation. So if the goal of the conversation was to ask somebody to be a volunteer, to ask somebody to join the board, to deepen the relationship, to see if they would consider, making an introduction, whatever it is, the ask effectiveness is correlated with the goal of the meeting. So it's not all about solicitation. And I think this is really important because what it means that is happening during these meetings is we are coming up with some reasons in our head around why we are not going to achieve the goal of the meeting. And so maybe before I talk about the positives of fear, what I actually really want to highlight is the way that fear is so tricky. Because
Mhm.
I remember like when I think about how many donor meetings I walked into with a goal in mind that maybe I was willing to say out loud or not, definitely not willing to say out loud with the donor, maybe not even with myself. And the amount of times in the middle of a conversation, I heard a voice that said, now's not a good time to ask for that. You thought it was before going into this meeting, but now's really not a good time to ask for that. Or, oh, that thing has come up with the donor. They've already done so much for us. Like, I can't possibly ask them to also do blank. Or, wow, they mentioned that friend who would be so amazing to meet. Maybe I'll ask for an introduction to them instead of the thing I was planning to do, which is asking them to lead a peer to peer campaign. And all of those voices, all of those messages in my head during those meetings, I was sure were strategic. I thought I was being so strategic, so compassionate, so loyal. I thought I was doubling down on that relationship building skill that I had because I was following an instinct. And
Mm.
actually, all of those messages were fear. They were all fear. They were my nervous system activated, trying to get me to play it safe, derailing the conversation. And because I couldn't notice the fear, because I didn't know what it actually was, it drove my conversations and it sabotaged my conversations truly.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that I didn't have at the time was anything holding me accountable, right? Like what we can do in Practivated that I couldn't do was to say, hey, look, I didn't accomplish my goal. Like my goal was to have this meeting really be intentionally about this. And I had nobody, coming out of that telling me, hey, you said you were going in there for X, Y, and Z. What happened here? Or even if I did have somebody saying that, I had a great reason for why I didn't do the thing, right? That felt super legit, but was just this sort of like protective fear story. And I think when I look at all of these indicators, insight gathering, structure, flow, adaptability under pressure, even relational depth, the thing that really pops out to me is the role that fear plays in sabotaging intentionality here, right? We don't ask that follow-up question because we're like, maybe they don't want to talk about it. They probably don't want to talk about those details of their kids' school. Oh, you
Hmm.
know what? I actually don't want to ask them more about their hospital stay, even though I'm having this grateful patient conversation because it's probably a super sensitive subject, right? All of those things. And I'm not saying don't use your emotional intelligence, but fear and intuition are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. But until we can really identify fear, and I'm sorry, I got on my soapbox and you can't get me off, but until we really like can be honest about those things with ourselves, with each other as a team, like it's going to continue to hit and then practice that piece. It's going to continue to derail these really deep, meaningful conversations where we're there, we're ready to move the conversation forward, and it's just throwing us off.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, to your point, right? Like fear, like I love the grateful patient example. Like fear in that scenario can be positioned as I I'm a compassionate fundraiser, right? I'm trying to extend care to someone that just went through a life-threatening health journey within our hospital. So I
Mhm.
can't ask them yet, right? That could even feel strategic. Oh, I can wait for the right time to ask them,
Mhm.
the optimal moment, right? So we can confuse these signals around um, how we're trying to act in the best interest of the experience of the donor, but what is the like source origin point of our compassion, of our strategic moves and timing, of our ability to be loyal to our peers, our mission, etc.
Right, because think about it, like, it doesn't make you any less compassionate or sensitive to say, "Hey, I if you don't wanna talk about this, please, like, feel free to we can change the subject, but I was just curious." Right? Does that make me less compassionate or less
Hmm.
like, not at all, but the reason I would avoid that is because of fear, not because there wasn't a way to be compassionate and ask another question or get to know them on a deeper level, right? Like when I ask for money, I will always say like, this next part of the conversation is the part that creates the most vulnerability in me because I appreciate you so much. And the last thing I want to do is give you any impression that I'm not so grateful for what you've done for our organization so far. And I also know that this is the sacred work that I do for us both to achieve our goals around blank, blank, blank. And so, are you ready to talk a little bit more about what this year could look like in terms of the work we could do together and the appetite you have for blank, right? Like, there's so
Mm,
many ways to be those versions of ourselves and still move the needle on these indicators, and we're not doing it. And we have a lot, and I just want to like, this is not intended to be a gut punch for folks, like at all, like really, like if you have stories like this, I so appreciate Nicole sharing one in the chat. Like everybody has these stories. I have trained
hmm.
for 100,000 fundraisers. Everybody has their stories that do this to them in the middle of conversation, and it's so incredibly normal.
Hmm. Hmm. 100%. There's a great question that was dropped into the Q&A. Thanks, Diego, for jumping in there. Diego said that usually the ask is left towards the end of the conversation. If we wanted to lean into what is uncomfortable, I wonder if we would structure conversations with an ask at the very beginning. Maybe this is related to what Mallory is mentioning about goals in the meeting. But it also thinks that I think this also relates to strategic structure of a
Mhm.
meeting. So how much are we leaning into our place of comfort and building a relationship versus leaning into our strategic structuring in order to get the outcome that we're working towards? So
Mm,
like beautifully said, Diego, and I think you've nailed it. And I think that the other, we say this a lot at Practivated. Like what I love about what we do here at Practivated is we are helping strengthen the one thing that technology can't replace, and it's your ability to build a meaningful, deep, rich relationship. And every conversation is going to have a different structure, a different strategy, a different approach, because we are working to someone that is innately human and innately one-to-one and innately personal. Um,
Yes. And, I think I just want to like very specifically answer Diego's question too, because I think, and this is another thing I appreciate about Practivated, right? Is that you guys, there's a lot of ways to be a great fundraiser. I think that's the really important thing to know. Oftentimes we're given scripts or templates for how to have a conversation. There are so many great ways to have a transformational conversation with a donor, thousands of them. And the best way is to be your most connected, authentic, strategic
mm,
self. That is the best way to have a conversation. So, Diego, I will tell you, I 100% was somebody who made the ask early in a conversation. I had a mentor many years ago who his advice to me was make the ask over soup, which was his way of saying, bring that piece of the conversation into the front. The reason that was his suggestion for me was because when I didn't do it early in the conversation, I spent the whole lunch thinking about how I was going to transition into that part of the conversation. So I would start a
mm,
meeting. I would start a meeting with some like casual catch up. And then I would say something like, I'm really excited to talk more about Lucy's first year of college. And I know we have a lot of other catching up to do on X, Y, and Z. I also know one of our intentions of having this meeting was to go over blank, blank, blank. How do you feel about sort of like taking care of that business, talking through that a little bit at the beginning, moving through that, and then we can just like spend the rest of lunch, catching up. And so for me and my nervous system and my fundraising style, that really, really worked and changed everything for me. But I don't want to give that as like a blanket like suggestion, because I also think there are phenomenal fundraisers that don't do it that way, and they're able
hmm
to stay in their best insight gathering, and they can structure and have flow even without doing it at the beginning, right? So I think that's what's so important to understand about yourself and your own style and your own fears, and the way those are sabotaging your achievement of these goals. And it's going to be a little bit different for everybody.
Amazing. I love it. I love it. I think, real quick, we've kind of been talking through some of these already, but again, these are kind of some of the moments where we're seeing even the most skilled fundraisers have hesitation, and it's making the clear, confident ask. It's what we're talking about here around structure and flow, guiding a conversation with intentionality, responding to a moment of unexpected donor feedback, maybe a moment of tension or pushback in a conversation, and digging deeper instead of kind of dancing on surface level support. But so I wanted to call that out quickly, but really what I want to highlight here is this challenge around ask effectiveness. And it's where I kind of started, Mallory, on how do we kind of flip the script on fear? And conversations move missions forward. But what I want to call out here is that comfortable conversations aren't enough. And so the data suggests that the inability to secure gifts is the result of unstructured conversations, unclear asks, and a lack of confident follow through. But it's going into like embracing our fear, going into the place of discomfort in order to push our mission forward. And I've actually be curious if you all were willing, and again, this is completely anonymous, but I would be really curious to understand, um, you know, where are you in your level of comfort in your donor conversations? I would love to just get a sense of the room of, how comfortable are you? How uncomfortable are you? And everywhere in between. Okay, we're seeing a balance of comfort in difficult conversations. We have a few people that are fully embracing challenging conversations. Second is a moderate amount of comfort. And we have a few folks in the room where comfort is my top priority. Thank you for the vulnerability.
Mhm.
Really appreciate that. But really interesting to get a sense of where everyone is here in the room in terms of it embracing like where you are on the spectrum of comfort in your conversations. But
Brian,
I think,
can
yeah,
I
jump in.
add something here really quick? Because I just want to like be super vulnerable. I think if you had asked me this question, I probably would have said balancing comfort and difficult conversations. But I think if I was being fully honest with myself, it would have been comfort as my top priority, not consciously, not in my brain, not intentionally, but I think there were so many times in conversations where where I started to get physically uncomfortable, like my nervous system was getting activated, and I had like a flight reaction. I fled the discomfort of that conversation by making something okay, or pushing away the ask, or having one of those fear, loyalty, compassion sentences come up. Like I just was afraid of rocking the boat. And I would accept restricted gifts like when I shouldn't have for that reason, because I was so uncomfortable with having that conversation around unrestricted funding. I would, you know, God, I could just actually spend the next hour talking about all the ways that I did this. And so I know we're asking people to be really vulnerable and they're just getting to know us. So I want to be like really honest. And I would just encourage everybody. And maybe you're like, no, Mallory, I know myself, like that's you and not. And that's totally cool. That's totally cool. But I also would just like invite people to really get curious here. Like, have there been time? Because I did see that response to like how we were talking about how tricky fear is. And so I just want to like open up that curiosity in folks around when they might be unconsciously prioritizing comfort, because that's how our bodies are designed. That's the
Mm-hmm.
purpose of our nervous system. That is its job, is to keep us comfortable, and uncertainty creates discomfort. So when we're in a conversation moment that brings up a lot of uncertainty, like it is our body's job to say, avoid that. You don't know, like it can't tell the difference between a lion's going to eat us in the woods and we're going to get lobbed a question we just answered to. And so like if you're experiencing that, your body's working perfectly, but it is getting in the way of you being able to move these conversations where you want them.
Yeah, and I just think that's a great call out, and I just want to like create space to like recognize how amazing it is, the work that you all are doing in the midst of
Yeah.
external chaos, external dysregulation, funding cuts, revenue challenges, right? Like everything that's impacting you from a federal standpoint, like all of the uncertainty, right? Like this is impacting the the consciousness and energy within your organization, within your body, and how that's impacting how you're even engaging with your donors. And I just think like we have to recognize how amazing it is what you hold in the midst of trying to push things forward. It's Herculean, it's heroic, um, and you all make just such incredible sacrifices to do the work that you do. And so my hope is that that message comes through most clear, as opposed to any of the sort of like gaps and areas of improvement that we're suggesting. It's like, no, no, no. At the end of the day, like we know, right? Like we've walked the path with you.
Yeah.
And I just want to recognize that.
I'm so glad that you said that, because I think that's the other of just such an important piece, right? Like stress is not compartmentalizable. So I was just talking to a healthcare system the other day where, they're seeing, a huge decrease in the number of patients coming for care. They're having to do budget cuts and lay off staff for the first time ever. Because of that, and there are all these different reasons for that, in addition to federal funding cuts, like and that stress, like that lives in our body. And so the desire then for our body to prioritize comfort in conversation, it's really because like our nervous system needs that protection, right? It's too much, right? I'm overstimulated, I'm overwhelmed. Like, please keep me safe, right? That's what I was trying to say. And it's doing all the right things. And what we want for all of you is to understand the relationship between that our brain can be tricky and it can sabotage us. And I don't want you sitting there at the end of the year being like, wow, why didn't this donor end up giving this
Mm-mm.
year? Or why did this donor give half as much? Or how come my fundraisers aren't able to move these conversations forward? We want to provide this insight so that you feel a sense of choice and agency in your conversations, because we also know, like, because you are doing so much, and we just want to give you as much information as we can to give you as much control over your outcomes as possible in the midst of all the chaos around you. But I love what Bryan said, because there's nothing we love more than fundraisers. And we really we really appreciate you, and we're really we really feel you in what's happening right now too.
Amazing. And I just want to say, like, Brianna, the comment that you just made in the chat, I mean, we're just like so grateful for that comment there. So I just wanted to say thank you, because it's something that we talk about internally here at Practivated as well. We truly want to step into the area of greatest need, and we see that as what is the best way to serve you. So thank you. Faith, I also know that you have a couple questions in the chat, but we only have 10 minutes left, so I will see if we have some time at the end. I just didn't want you to think that I was ignoring your questions. Thanks so much for submitting them. We have about 10 minutes left, so I just want to get through some good news that I have for y'all. But we'll see if we'll leave some time at the end for a few questions. I think, real quick is there is more good news, and that all of the data points that we're tracking are teachable skills. And something that the data also shows is that they strengthen, they improve with repetition, with practice, with feedback, and with intentional focus. And so something that we see is, on average, when a fundraiser goes into their first simulation and they get tabulated a score across the 16 data indicators that we shared at the beginning, once they go through a second and third simulation, we're actually seeing, aggregated across all fundraisers, improve at least a minimum 5% improvement in their scores. So they're getting in practice, they're doing that repetition, they're getting feedback from our AI coach, Tivi, where she will suggest to you, hey, let's focus on this low score, and here's what you can try and say differently to make a more of an effective ask, right? Like those, that coaching is happening in the platform, and we're actually seeing improvement in the data. And so, and again, like, it doesn't matter where you are or what access to tools that you have at your fingertips, but it could be as simple as taking 15 minutes a day to work with a colleague in your office and work together through preparing and practicing for a donor conversation that you have tomorrow. Like, the data shows that those actions will help you. And so I think that that's just such an incredible bright spot. And the takeaway from us is that real growth comes from iterative, situation-specific practice, not from generic repetition. Anything you want to jump in here and add, Mallory?
I just want to say, and I'll answer maybe a few questions or a question in the chat. Like, we really are wanting, obviously, to encourage practice and repetition and role play separate from Practivated. I just want to make that crystal clear. Like, if you have a way and a system for folks to practice, get feedback, practice again inside your organization, please do it. Like, I think, yes, we have an ability to capture these results inside the platform in a way that we couldn't compare them to other types of role play environments. We don't have that type of data out there. But I think that, really for me, like, I really want to make sure that we are promoting practice and role play in general also. And, Patricia was asking, like, do you have any data that shows fundraisers who use your platform improve their real life performance? Yes, we absolutely do. We are not integrated into any CRM systems or anything like that, so we don't get real time analytics. But we've only been in the market publicly since August, and so we have a number of case studies. I just tried to drop a link that I think I somehow broke the comment. So I'll try to drop it in the chat. I don't know what I did. But we have a number of case studies, and we hear anecdotal feedback every single day about the way that the tool is improving their performance, making them feel more prepared, helping build their confidence, the way it has. We've had a fundraiser who spent 12 minutes inside the platform practicing for a donor meeting, getting feedback, applying that, and then emailed us and was like, I just raised $5,000 that I didn't expect because Tivi totally had me change my approach here. And so we get to hear those stories every single day.
Yeah, and I think to just double down on that, some other things that we see that's happening in different facets of the development department is, um, we're hearing that, the University of Central Florida has actually, in terms of, what they've invested in the platform, they've gotten a 10x return on investment because their fundraisers are asking and securing gifts more effectively. That was like an incredible takeaway that took about 90 days for the team to do that. But we're also even seeing on the new hire side, we're seeing HR teams seeing great success onboarding new employees at a more effective rate. University of Texas El Paso actually has new fundraising staff getting into donor conversations 280% faster than previous staff that weren't integrating coaching into their onboarding. So they're getting into donor conversations faster and more effectively, which is moving the needle on their mission as well, which is incredible. So thanks for asking that, Patricia.
And I love what Adam put in the chat too, right? Like beyond the data in here, yes, this role play is a tried and true method used by various practices and has been, yeah, proven to demonstrate huge results. And some of the things I want y'all to learn from how we do it in Practivated and apply to your other models that I think maybe we have a slide for this, Bryan. I can't remember, is I think the goal setting around the role play is super, super important. Like we have heard a lot from folks that because they goal set in the role play, it actually helps them goal set around their donor meetings in real life. And then in those conversations, they are more conscious and aware and driving towards those outcomes in the meeting. So adding a level of intentionality to their in-person meetings. So when you're doing role play in whatever environment you're doing it in, set goals, have the fundraiser set a goal for each one of those role plays. Make sure that you're giving specific feedback related to areas that you can measure and track over time. So like I think one of the things that and increase the difficulty of the role play. One of the things I think that we've seen that's so exciting inside Practivated is the way folks will go into our practice library, they'll do an easy version of the practice, get feedback from Tivy on the areas where they had the biggest challenge. Then they'll go back to our practice library, move the slider to medium, practice the scenario again at a higher difficulty level. So one of the things I really want to encourage folks is like if you're role playing different scenarios inside, you want to be you want an easy, medium, hard version of that, right? Not every grateful patient simulation should start with somebody excited to talk about their experience. Sometimes they're going to say, "How'd you get my phone number?" Right? And you want to make sure that you're increasing that difficulty level and giving feedback and then doing the best that you can to measure those skills and growth over time as well. I know I'm getting a few private chats about asking if folks do want to learn more, they don't have a way to practice or role play themselves and are interested in having support in Practivated. So while we go through this last content, Giancarlo, maybe you can drop Holly's link if folks do want to, before they have to jump off, if they do want to learn more about Practivated and how it might work for their organization. Obviously, we'd love to support you, but we really want to make sure that we're giving you recommendations for how you role play in your organization, no matter how you role play in your organization.
Amazing. And we bubbled up some suggestions here too, around, if you're looking to practice and work on, how to navigate flow and transitions that are rocky, creating some suggestions around building structure and intentionality around your conversation, right? If donor sentiment rises with empathy and alignment, how are we making sure and putting pre-prep into how we're layering in and reinforcing the power of our mission? How are we aligning a donor's values to our mission, right? So doing those things with deeper intentionality are just some of the recommendations that we have here. And again, we're going to share all these slides so that you all can take these back and digest them. But I think, as we wrap, if you're doing role play and practice in person, um, finding ways to track your skill trends, is so powerful. And, again, we're seeing in real time, like with Practivated, we can help spot where the support is needed most. And so it's taking insight from human behavior and translating it in a way in which it can actually impact your performance, your effectiveness in fueling the needs of your mission. And I think, the last thing that we'll end with, and this is just a reminder and an encouragement, is that your individual growth and fundraising growth and the growth of your organization and the expansion of your programs and your impact is not linear, because the conversations that you're having are not linear. They're nuanced, they're diverse, um, and you all are holding a lot amongst all of the relationships that you are developing. And so I think that's our reminder too, that, we can also be kinder and gentler on ourselves, because you are navigating towards, a binary goal on whether you reach that goal or you don't, but you're navigating conversations that are not linear. And so again, this is just us applauding and cheering on the incredible work that you're doing.
Also, I love Kimmy showing up in the chat. Proactivated has made me so much more confident in my work. That makes me so happy. And yes, if you're an individual and you want to get the platform for yourself, just email Holly. She can send you a link to sign up as an individual as well. So just holly@proactivated.com. And then if you're interested in exploring sort of the team analytics and insights and stuff, you can book time with her also there. But I hope no matter what, especially as you think about the end of the year, that you are really giving opportunities to say things out loud before you walk into that donor meeting. Cherry and Koshi is coming out with an amazing book in a few weeks. And I didn't even know this, but I was interviewing him for the fundraising, and he started to talk about some of the research around what happens when we say things for the first time in an
Mm,
actual meeting, and how dangerous that is, and how important it is that we've said things out loud ahead of time. And so, and he has all the research to back that up. And so it's really like, I know the next 6 weeks are stressful. I know that there's a million reasons to say we don't have time for X, Y, and Z. Make the time to practice these conversations. It's going to make the fundraising feel better to you. It's going to be good for your nervous system. It's going to help you with the overwhelm. It's going to be it's just going to change so much in terms of your end of year experience. And just like Bryan said, we care so much about y'all. And we just want you to get through this year as best you can, given everything that's getting thrown your way.
Amazing. And just to close us out real quick, I know I mentioned earlier, the team at UCF has seen incredible impact in the effectiveness of their fundraisers. These are, just a few stats in terms of what they're seeing with what happens and what comes with practice. Their team's seen collectively a 33% increase in their ask effectiveness. They're building deeper trust, and they have amazing connection sentiment with their donors. So again, these are all just like amazing signals to us that reinforces, the data is telling us exactly what Mallory just shared, creating that space for practice. And again, after the call today, I'm going to follow up. We'll be sure to share the recording and the slides. I'll make sure that you get a full copy of the report. No problem at all. And then, of course, we're always here to help. And so if you're curious around if we can help you practice, we would love to do so. So we'll also provide an opportunity for you to connect with our team for a short period of time and to dive in and be curious and ask questions around, can we help? And we would love to help you throughout the rest of this year and into the future. And if we don't cross paths again before the year ends, we see you. We are cheering you on. You have got this. We believe in you. You're powerful. You're capable, more capable than all of those fears that might be driving some of the ways that we interact and behave. You've got this. And so thank you for spending an hour with us. We know how precious your time is. We know how busy you are. We know everything that you're juggling. So the fact that you chose to spend this hour with us means the world, and we will be in touch. Thank you. Bye, y'all.
Hi, everyone.